Hello there. Today, I want to share one of the most powerful and heartwarming stories ever told, The Prodigal Son. It's a tale of mistakes, forgiveness, and redemption, and it comes straight from the Bible in Luke chapter 15. So, settle in and let's explore this beautiful story together. Once upon a time, there was a man who had two sons. This man was a farmer, and he was quite wealthy. His land was fertile, his workers were many, and his family lacked nothing. But the younger son, let's call him Jake, he was restless. He wanted something more. He didn't want to spend his life on the farm, plowing fields or feeding animals. He wanted adventure, excitement, and freedom. So one day, Jake made a bold and frankly shocking request. He went to his father and said, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance now. I don't want to wait until you're gone." Now, imagine that for a moment. In their culture, asking for your inheritance early was like saying, "I care more about your money than you." But despite the hurt this request might have caused, the father didn't argue. He divided his property between his two sons. Jake gathered his share, bags of money, clothes, maybe even a few valuables, and set off to a faraway land. In this faraway place, Jake lived it up. He had money to burn, and burn it he did. Fancy clothes, big feasts, wild parties, Jake had it all. He made new friends who loved his generosity, but they weren't really friends, were they? They were just there for the good times. But here's the thing about living recklessly. The money runs out, and for Jake, it ran out fast. As if that weren't bad enough, a famine struck the land. Food became scarce, and Jake, once a big spender, found himself broke, hungry, and alone. Jake was desperate. He found a job feeding pigs, which for a young Jewish man was as low as it could get. Pigs were considered unclean, and here he was, not just feeding them, but so hungry he wanted to eat their food. Can you imagine that? From a life of luxury to wishing for pig food. This was rock bottom. But sometimes hitting rock bottom is the wake-up call we need. As Jake sat there in the mud, he thought to himself, "Even my father's servants have more than enough to eat, and here I am starving. I'll go back home. I'll tell my father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son. Let me be one of your servants." And with that, Jake got up and began the long journey back home. Now picture this. Jake is walking home, rehearsing his apology in his head. He's bracing himself for anger, rejection, maybe even the cold shoulder. But while he's still far off, his father sees him. How? Because his father had been watching, hoping, waiting for the day Jake would come home. And what does the father do? He runs to Jake, not walks, not waits. He runs, throws his arms around his son and kisses him, tears streaming down his face. Jake starts his apology. "Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm not worthy to be called your son." But the father interrupts him. He calls to his servants, "Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Kill the fattened calf. We're going to have a feast. My son was dead, and now he's alive again. He was lost, and now he's found." And just like that, the whole household erupted in celebration. There was music, dancing, and joy beyond measure. Meanwhile, Jake's older brother, let's call him Eli, was out in the fields. When he came back and heard the music and saw the celebration, he was furious. Eli refused to go inside. "What's going on?" he demanded of one of the servants. The servant replied, "Your brother has come home, and your father is throwing a feast because he's back safe and sound." Now, you'd think Eli would be happy, right? But he wasn't. He was angry. He felt it was unfair. He told his father, "All these years I've worked for you. I've obeyed you, and you've never thrown a party for me. But this son of yours wastes your money, and you celebrate him?" The father responded with love and patience. "My son," he said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad. Your brother was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And that's the story of the prodigal son. It's a story about forgiveness, how the father forgave his son unconditionally. It's about redemption, how Jake, despite his mistakes, was welcomed back with open arms. But it's also a story about perspective. Sometimes we're like Jake, needing forgiveness. Other times we're like Eli, struggling to understand grace. The father in this story represents God, loving, forgiving, and always ready to welcome us home, no matter how far we've strayed. So, whether you feel like Jake or Eli today, remember, God's love is bigger than our mistakes, and His grace is always enough. Thanks for watching, and I hope this story touched your heart as much as it touches mine every time I read it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring Bible stories like this one to uplift you and build your faith. Until next time, stay blessed.